Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. Happy Friday, first day of a nice and well-deserved 3-day weekend. My name is Adrian. Along with me today, my other co-hosts, Yvonne and Mina. We want to thank you for tuning in with us today to our line-by-line review of the California DREAM Act application presented by the Student Aid Commission. So again, we're going to have three presenters today, myself, Yvonne, and Mina, but we also have our other training and outreach colleagues here that will be able to answer questions by using our question and answer box during the presentation. We will also have two breaks through this presentation when we get to the sections where, again, my other colleagues, Yvonne and Mina, will then take over. Now, I know we have a diverse crowd with us today from high school actual seniors, counselors, district county office of education, Dreamer Resource Center staff, advocacy organizations, all here to learn about how to complete this application. So again, thank you so much for being here today. So I'm going to go ahead and turn my camera off at this time because I don't want to be too distracting and I want you to be able to concentrate on this very important information that we will be going over today. So, completing the California DREAM Act application. And it's been, I want to say, many years that it's been asked of us to have a line-by-line detailed breakdown of all it takes to complete this application. And for the first time today, here it is, by popular demand. So quickly, we have some housekeeping rules that we're going to go over here. We are going to be muting the actual audio to eliminate any background noise. If you, like I was saying, have any questions, please use the question and answer box, and we can go ahead and get those questions answered for you in real time. As you have been prompted, we are recording this, and we will be making this available on our website, as you can see, csac.ca.gov very shortly. Also, for those of you that registered, we did send out a PDF of today's webinar. So if you did not receive it, please check your either spam or junk box. But if you do not see it or you did not receive it, you can send us an email at outreachandtraining@csac.ca.gov and we will send one to you. Now, this will be about a 2-hour presentation, and we will be taking 2 5-minute breaks during the presentation. So let's go over today's agenda. So why go to college? And things you need to do before you actually begin to fill out this application. Then we will go section through section, section 1 being student demographics, section 2, school selection, section 3, dependency status, section 4, student financial information, sections 5 and 6, parental information, section 7, sign and submit, and after submitting the application, what are your next steps? So it all starts with filling out a financial application, be it the FAFSA or, like we're talking today, the California DREAM Act application, because all financial aid starts with a financial application, as colleges are required to have students complete this application before any aid, be it federal, if you are a FAFSA filer, and for both FAFSA and DREAM Act filers, state and campus-based aid cannot be even discussed until an application is completed. And for Cal grants, we do have a priority filing deadline, which is coming up very, very soon, which is March 2nd. So please apply before this date so you can maximize your financial aid opportunities. So one thing that is new this year is what we call all in for FAFSA, or the California Dream Act application, or also known as Assembly Bill 469. But we don't want to go, that's a clunky name, Assembly Bill 469. So it has been rebranded all in for FAFSA California Dream Act. And what this is we want to ensure that all students fill out an application. And what this bill is doing is charging high schools, continuation schools, school districts, also what's called local education agencies, that all seniors complete a financial application unless they are not able or not eligible to fill one out. And in this case, they must formally submit an opt-out waiver. But we hope that most, if not all, of our eligible students fill out this application. And this is something that's great because we are only one of 8 states in the United States that actually have a mandate that their students complete a financial aid application. So it all begins with which application should you complete? And this is dependent on your citizenship status. So if you are a US citizen or a permanent resident or eligible non-citizen, you will be able to complete and eligible to complete the FAFSA, which can be found at studentaid.gov. But if you are an undocumented immigrant, have a valid DACA, or even an expired DACA, or do not have a DACA social security number, if you have what's called TPS, which is temporary protective status, the U visa holder, or you meet the non-resident exemption requirements of AB 540, which we'll talk about here on the next slide, you will be eligible to complete the California Dream Act at our website, dream.csac.ca.gov. So what is the California Dream Act application? This is the application for undocumented and non-resident documented students that meet AB 540 criteria to apply for state and institutional aid. Students who complete the Dream Act application, unfortunately, are not eligible for federal financial aid, such as the Pell Grant. But it does allow qualified students to not only be considered for financial aid, but also pay the in-state resident fees for the California public colleges and universities, which, just to give you an idea, usually the in-state pay typically about 5 times less than what a out-of-state resident would pay for tuition. So not only does it have you paying lower tuition and fees, but also gives you the opportunity to be considered for financial aid. So what is AB 540? So to be eligible, you must meet 3 requirements to be considered AB 540 eligible. So the first option is that you have 3 years of high school coursework and 3 years of total attendance at any K through 12 school, so elementary, middle school, or high school. But in 2000, it was SB 68 actually expanded and gave a second option, and that is 3 years of attendance or the equivalent at a high school, adult school, or community college. So on top of either option A or option B, you also must graduate from California high school or obtain a certificate of completion. GED, HiSET, or TASC test, or you can earn an associate's degree from a California community college, or fulfill the minimum transfer requirements for the UC or CSU's systems. And lastly, for those that do not have lawful immigration status, a non-resident tuition exemption waiver must be completed, which says that you will file or have filed an application to legalize your immigration status as soon as possible. The affidavit will then exempt qualifying students from paying non-resident tuition and also certifies that you are eligible to apply for a Cal Grant under the California DREAM Act application. So we want to really stress that it is important that we keep your information confidential and will not share any information with the federal government. We here at the Commission protect your confidentiality of your student records and have and will never share any information about a student's immigration status, documented or undocumented. We also comply with the Family Education Rights and Privacy Act, or FERPA, which also protects the privacy of student educational records. Now, the application opens October 1st and will remain open until the end of the academic year, which is June 30th. Now, again, March 2nd is the priority filing deadline for Cal Grant consideration. So we encourage students to apply as soon as possible, because the earlier that you apply allows you to maximize the maximum award possibilities that you may be eligible for. New this year, students that are planning on attending a community college can also apply for a Cal Grant past the March 2nd deadline with our community college entitlement, but you must apply by September 2nd for this program. There are also some colleges that may have earlier priority admission deadlines, so it is important to check with the college or colleges that you are looking at to make sure that you meet all deadlines. And one last thing, you can also apply for financial aid before you submit your college applications. So, what are some things that you will need to apply for the California DREAM Act? First is a list, or well, first, I'm sorry, is the personal email address. And we highly suggest that you create an email address just for your college communications. We want you to ensure that this email that you are using is one that you will check, because all communications will be sent. And again, you want to reply to those communications as soon as possible after receiving those communications. Second is have a list up to 10 colleges that you are looking or considering attending. Now, if you have more, that is great, but we will also talk about it later, but you will have to add those additional colleges in a subsequent submission. Next, 3, which is tax or income information from 2 years prior, or sometimes you may have heard it called prior year. Be sure that you have any income taxes, W-2s, 1099 forms that has your income information from 2 years prior, both student and parent. Also, number 4, you need to have current financial information, such as how much do you have in a bank account, and a list of assets such as stocks or a second home. And last but not least, number 4, if you have a ITIN or individual taxpayer identification number, you will need this. Now, it is an optional field. and it may not pertain to you if you did not make enough money to file taxes. All right, so we do have our online application available, as you can see, at dream.csac.ca.gov, and it is in English. But we do, under our resources, have a downloadable PDF version of the application that is available in both English and Spanish. Now, one thing that we do say is it's highly recommended to complete the online application, as it will reduce any chances of delays or errors. But if you do download the, say, Spanish application, you can then take that information and then input it into the online system. So from our landing page, you will see the DREAM Act website, and you will be presented with 3 options. So the first one in blue is for first-time users, and this is for individuals that have never before applied, and you will select the Start button. Second is returning user in green. If you are a returning user, you are someone that either started an application and had to come back to complete it. You need to renew your application. Say last year you were a freshman, you got it, and you want to continue with your education and financial aid, you will be a renewing student. Or if you need to make any corrections, or like I was saying, if you had more than 10 colleges and you want to add some new ones to your application, you will select Log On. And lastly, we have parent signature. And this is where parents of dependent students can create the parent PIN, which is, in essence, the electronic signature required to fully process your applications. And as you can see on the top where it says information and resources, this is where you will be able to get our training videos and the PDF versions of the application, also our other resources. So when starting a new California DREAM Act application, you first need to register to verify that you are eligible to complete the DREAM Act application. So you will click continue to start this process. So the DREAM Act has a skip logic that will walk you through and ensure that you are eligible to complete this application. So DREAM Act filers typically do not have a social security card. So you, in this case, you would say no and select continue. At this point, if you did say yes to the social, it will also ask you if you received the social security number after the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services granted the DACA or Deferred Action Status. Next, it will go over the AB 540 requirements that we talked about a few slides ago. So if you want, again, additional information regarding eligibility, you can see the help and hints page on the application or check our website for more information. If you meet eligibility requirements, you will be informed that you are eligible, and then you can click Start Application. At this point, you will then need to create a user account. So you will need to provide such basic information as your name, date of birth, and create a user ID. Now, you want to ensure that your name and date of birth match your birth certificate or official government identification. You really want to in all aspects with your college admission applications and your financial aid applications to use the same name and date of birth that, again, are listed on your either birth certificate or official identification. Now, if you have different names, you will need to contact either your high school or college to update their records to your official, name and date of birth. Now, like any online form, when you see the red asterisk, that means that field is required. Next, you will see that it's going to ask you for your address. So please use a permanent address. Do not use a temporary mailing address. And if you do not have a permanent mailing address, you can ask your college's financial aid administrator for assistance. As we said again, please provide a personal email, not a school email, for communications purposes. So again, ensure that this is an email that you will always have access to and be able to respond if messages are sent to you. You will then receive this. You have created your user account and to check your email. Once you receive that link, you will then be able to activate your account and create a password and then be able to log in to the system. Once you have created that password, you will then be prompted to create 3 challenge questions. We recommend that you write this information down because this is how you will be able to reset your password if you forget. So some things that you want to either write down or maybe create a note within your phone is you want to write down your username, password, the email address that you will be using, your challenge questions, and when it comes to your parent, they want to ensure that they write down their parent PIN when they create it. So with this, we are ready to fill out the DREAM Act application. So once you, again, are past the initial registration, you will log in to your account. And again, it will actually ask you to, because it'll give you a one-time password, it will ask you to reset your password to your permanent password. Once you have done so, you will then be on the welcome screen. And this is where it will ask you, which academic year are you going to be filling out for this application? And in this case, as you will see, you will be at most times seeing 2 school years. The one on the left will be for the upcoming school year. So in this case, that will be the 23-24 school year. And the current school year on the right, which is the 22-23 school year. Now, if you are a senior and thinking about going to summer school, it is a good idea to go ahead and fill out both years' application because the school will need information for the current school year for the summer term, as that's the end of the current school year. And then the next school year will be for the coming fall term. Once you select, it will confirm which application you are going to complete. And as you can see, we're going to go ahead and fill out the application for the upcoming school year, the 23-24 school year. Once we have gone past that pop-up, you will then get some tips here. Please read through these instructions and then select OK. These instructions are helpful tips that will help you avoid making mistakes while you are completing the application. All right, so the first section is student data. As you can see, the application is in 3 sections: student, parent, and submit. And then it is then broken down into smaller subsections. So as you can see, we are in the student section. And then under that, we have demographics, school, dependency, and financial. As you can see, the red exclamation lets us know that that section is not complete. And once completed, that will turn to a green check mark. So the information that you provided upon the creation of your account will actually pre-populate in the demographic section. From here, you want to ensure that this information is correct. Lastly, throughout the application, you will see the right upper portion, right under sign and submit, we have a feature called Auto Hint. And this will display pop-up definitions and helpful information within the application for the section that you are currently in. So this next section will ask about your residency. And you must be a California resident for 1 year or meet the AB 540, or what we again call the non-resident tuition exemption requirements for consideration for such aid as Cal Grant, Chafee Grant, middle class scholarship, and in-state tuition. The next section here is where you will enter such information as your telephone number, the SSID, or known as the statewide student identification number. If you have this information would be obtained from your high school. So if you do not know that number, you can contact your high school for this information. The SSID is not required, but it is recommended if you have this information, as it will ensure that later in the process of awarding for such things as Cal Grants, that we can match your GPA to your financial application. And the SSID is not a social security number or ITIN number. Lastly, the last 2 questions is if you have a driver's license or ID card, this is where you can input that information. It is, for the driver's license, a optional, but also something that if you do enter this information can help prevent identity theft. Next, it will ask you about your citizenship status. So any undocumented or DACA students should choose I am not a citizen or eligible non-citizen as your citizenship status. Students with TPS, or temporary protective status, or a U visa should also select I am not a citizen or eligible non-citizen. Students with a student visa or any other non-immigrant visa are not eligible to complete this application. So In this next section here, it is important to answer these correctly. First, will you have your first bachelor's degree before you begin the next school year? Most students should answer no. You should only select yes if you have or will have a bachelor's degree from a school in another country, or will have a degree that is equal to a bachelor's degree from a school in another country before you begin the academic year 23-24. The second is, what will your grade level be when you begin the next school year? If you took college courses while in high school and were duly enrolled, you are still considered a first-time college student and should select never attended college first year. The third, what college degree or certificate will you be working on when you begin the next school year? You want to select the option that best fits your initial educational goal. So if you are uncertain if you will attend a community college or a four-year college, go ahead and select four-year college. And it is very important that you do not select second bachelor's degree unless you don't already have a bachelor's degree, because this will unfortunately limit the grants that you can qualify for. So with this, please answer these questions to the best of your ability. And the questions are in regards to your parents' education level. So the question is actually stated, what is the highest level of education your parents completed? If you select other unknown, this should be used as a last resort, but it is okay to select it. Parents do not refer to either a legal guardian or foster parent. It is your biological parents. Now, answering these questions will impact the awarding of Cal Grant, but only when the commission scores for what we call the Cal Grant B top 2%. What this does is it allows us to look at what we call disadvantaged criteria. In this case, parents' education level is factored in to this scoring. All right, so we're going to take a very quick 5-minute break here. Please continue to ask questions during the break, and we will then have Yvonne come up and she will take us through the second section. We will start at 1:40.
All righty, everybody. Thank you for tuning in today. My name is Yvonne Hollingsworth, and I am the second of 3 presenters today. So thank you, Adrian, for getting us through section 1, the pre-registration and the actual student demographic section of the DREAM Act application. We're going to now continue with the, oh, I've got the wrong slide up. We actually already talked about student demographics. Let me get to the current section. One moment. Here we are. School selection, section 2. So I just wanted to show my face and say hello, but we will go ahead and get started, and I'll turn my video off so as not to distract. All righty. Thank you. All right. Section 2, the school selection. So in this section, students are going to choose first of all, the name of the high school that they attended, and then we'll talk about the college selection. So if the student indicated that they were still in high school or already graduated, got a high school diploma, then the system or the online application is going to ask the name of the high school that the student attended. So they can use the search function and they can just type in a partial name of the school name. So in this case, we did a partial search with PAS, short for Pasadena, and that pulls up all of these options. When the student sees their high school name appear, you would just click on it and then proceed to the next screen. Now, when it comes to the college search screen, students can list up to 10 colleges at a time. When I say at a time, what I mean is that initially, they'll only be able to input 10 colleges. After just about 4 hours, if students want to change any data on the application, add different colleges, they can do that. They can go back in and wipe out those first 10 and add up to 10 more, or make any other changes for that matter after about 4 hours. But students can use the same search function to find their college name, right? Either search by the partial college name, search by, say, UC, however they want to search, or even by the school name. But when they see the list of names populate, they can go ahead and select the college that they're looking for. Just a quick tip here. So if you have a student who wants to apply to, say, multiple UCs or multiple CSUs, they will have to add each college, each campus individually. So just selecting UC is not going to add all of those UC campuses to the application. So they just have to click through all of the options and choose the schools that they are interested in attending. And another really important piece of the college selection is that for every college a student lists, the application is going to ask what their housing plans are, right? If they're going to college local and close to home, they may choose to live with their parents still. Other options, of course, are living on campus, and that's only going to be offered at universities. I've never heard of a junior college or community college that has on-campus housing. But if you do, choose the appropriate living situation, or off campus. That would mean an apartment or another type of a lodging away from campus, but also not with family. And this information is factored in to the college cost of attendance. So for any students listening on the line, that may not mean a whole lot to you, but basically you want to choose the housing plan that's most appropriate for that specific college that you'll be attending. And there is a living allowance associated with each of these situations. There's an on-campus allowance, a with parent or with family, if you're living with family, allowance, and then the off-campus allowance. And those are all factored into the cost of attendance. So you do want to choose the correct housing plan for that specific campus. Now, notice here, the order that students list the colleges on the application does not matter. And the reason is because our system will automatically select the first college that's listed if a student is preliminarily awarded a Cal Grant. And we will sort of point that Cal Grant to that school, but before that school actually receives those funds, students are then prompted through their Web Grants for Students portal. They'll get an email saying something to the effect of, congratulations, you're preliminarily offered a Cal Grant. Please log into your Web Grants for Students portal to confirm the college of attendance. So it's at that point where the students can always change the campus if the number one campus that they listed is not the one that they actually end up attending. So no biggie there. If they have them in a various mixed order, they can always confirm it on their Web Grants for Students portal if they're awarded. Now, I already mentioned this at once, but it's good information, so I'll mention it again. Students can list initially 10 colleges on that application, but if you want to add more, just wait 4 hours and then go back into that school selection screen, wipe out the first 10 and add up to 10 more. It's pretty easy. That's one thing I can say is easy about that process, is being able to log back in and add more schools or change the schools. So we're moving into section 3, students' dependency status. So most students, most high school students are likely going to be considered dependent, which means that they would provide parent information. However, independent students do not have to report their parent information. And so for independent students, we are determining financial eligibility based on that student's income. And if the student's married, their spouse's income. Whereas with dependent students, we're really looking at the parent's income, right? The family income. So most students are automatically considered independent at age 24. However, there are situations where a student younger than 24 years of age might be also considered independent and therefore not have to report parent income. And so the next set of questions that we're going to look at on that application goes through a series of, 13 to 15 dependency related questions. And if a student answers yes to any one of those questions, they will be independent for financial aid purposes and therefore not need to report parent income. This is advantageous if a student can be considered independent. That's advantageous to the student typically because most students don't make enough money to disqualify them financially, whereas parent income is typically much larger, right? So there are certain students who may very well be considered independent even though they are younger than age 20. For example, if that student is already married, if they've served in the military, if they have children of their own who they support, if they were part of the foster care system, there are a lot of scenarios. So we're going to go through all of those today. So here's that one question. Are you married as of today? If the student answers yes, they're automatically considered independent. If they've already obtained a bachelor degree and they're beyond that and are now working on a master's program or a doctorate, those are also going to be considered independent students. A quick note here, if a student is living with a significant other, but they're not married, they're still going to be considered single on this question. Now, the other question is here, right? Or one of the other dependency questions appears here. It asks, do you now have children or will you have children who will receive more than half of your support between July 1st? July 1st is always the start of the academic year. And June 30th is the end of the academic year every year. So it's asking during the school year, do you or will you have your own children that you're providing more than half of their support? So say yes if that's true. And that again is going to make that student independent and not have to report parent information or income. By the way, for those who are familiar with the Students with Dependents Pell Grant Award that the Commission offers, this is where we get that information and we can preliminarily offer the Students with Dependents Award to students when they answer yes. There's a secondary confirmation that happens later, but this is where that initial information comes from. Some of the other questions we'll ask of the student's household size, how many of the students are going to be in college, right? And it tells you right on the application, especially if you turn on the auto hints option or function, it's going to pop up right along the sidebar, as Adrian showed us earlier, what the definitions are. So it's going to tell the student as they're filling out these questions, who is considered part of the student's household. You can also click on the little information icon and see that hint that way. So basically, if a student is wondering who is counted in their household, it's going to be the student themselves, a spouse if applicable, and their children if they're supporting them by more than 50%, and any other dependents that the student is supporting. Notice it also gives in the same help and hints who not to include as part of the household, right? Don't include siblings or other relatives. And then entering the number of students in college from that student's household. Most students are going to just indicate one for themselves. Alrighty, and so continuing on with these dependency questions, once again, answering yes to any one of these questions makes the student independent. So another one of the questions refers to military service, right? Either active duty or a veteran. Foster care, students who are in the foster care system or whose parents were both deceased since age 13 are automatically going to be considered independent. Just a quick note here, for students who have these exceptions, like having been in the foster care system, or on the next screen when we look at homelessness, those are all reasons that a student would be considered independent. But at the college, they're going to ask for additional documentation to support those statements. And so foster youth would answer yes to this if they were in the foster care system since age 13. Or if a student is under legal guardianship, and this is not just an attorney-driven guardianship situation, it's actually a court-appointed guardian. So those are also reasons that a student would be considered independent. And then the student homelessness questions. There's a series of questions asking, starting with, were you homeless? So, or self-supporting or at risk of being homeless. If the student indicates yes, then we'll see what happens on the next screen. If they answer no, they still just move on to the next section. So if a student is unaccompanied and homeless, unaccompanied by a parent is what that means. Meaning there's no contact with the parent is not supporting them, and that student is not only without their parent, but they are at risk of or actually homeless. So sadly, there are students in this situation. So when that happens at the college, they're going to ask you for this documentation. But if you have it, indicate right here on the screen which of those documents you have in your possession. If none, choose none of the above and click next. Now, if you indicated that you're homeless, but your college is going to ask you for that documentation, right? So it prompts and instructions right on the screen. So this is an application, whether it's FAFSA or the DREAM Act application. Both applications do require a lot of careful reading and to be very, very detailed so that students and those who are assisting them understand what the questions are asking. And notice also, if a student doesn't have any contact with their parent, even if they don't have those documents that we were discussing that support their homelessness, schools in the financial aid office at the college can also help the student make that determination. They might have alternative ways and alternative documents that they can request, but they will try to work with the students to assist them as best they can. So if the student continues on with the application and they aren't able to provide parent information, not so much because mom and dad don't want to provide the information, but because they don't really have contact with the parents, that would be the extenuating circumstance, no contact with parents. If that happens, the student can proceed with the application, but they're going to get this pop-up message saying, hey, you've indicated you're not providing parent information, but know that these things can occur. You might have limited eligibility for financial aid without that information, unless students meet these independent criteria, which the college can also assist with in special situations. So the important thing, though, is that if a student does not provide the parent information and they're not fully considered independent, they really do want to work with the college financial aid office. Colleges have the authorization to review and amend these applications on a case-by-case basis. So keep in mind that some of these questions are sort of cookie cutter questions. And so a student may very well be independent based on their special circumstance, even though the application can't make that determination. And that's where the school, the college financial aid office is going to be your friend. So please be proactive, or remind your students to be proactive if they think they have one of these scenarios that would qualify them for a special review of the application and maybe an override of the application's information. And so once again, just to confirm, right, if the student indicates that they're unaccompanied and homeless or at risk of being homeless, they can indicate whether or not they're going to be able to provide information about their parents. Now, one of the other dependency questions is sort of tied to our foster youth, right? So there's a Chafee grant application for students who were in the foster care system between 16 and 18 years of age. So if you have a student who thinks they fit into that criteria, have them say yes here, right? That they think that they were in a foster care placement. That will sync up with the California Department of Social Services so that we can confirm whether or not they were part of the foster care system and met this criteria of the age requirement between 16 and 18 years of age. But that's just going to be more beneficial to the student because they're then going to have another opportunity outside of just the state financial aid like a Cal grant, but they might also then be able to get additional monies through the Chafee grant. Okay, moving into section 4, the student financial information section. Keep your questions coming. We have our staff live answering your questions. So we want to make sure everybody gets their questions answered while you have us here. So in this section, the student financial information, even though for dependent students, we're looking more at parent income, the application will still ask for student income. But know that student income is not looked at or weighted in the same way that parent income is for a dependent student. So it's going to ask the same set of questions for student in the student section and in the parent section. So right now we're looking at the student section. It's going to ask, have you completed your IRS tax return for, and it's going to say 2021, because if this is the 2023-2024 financial aid application, we are using financial data and tax information from 2 years prior. So on the actual application for 2023-2024, it will say for 2021, have you completed your IRS tax return? And it's going to ask the same identical questions in the parent section. So know that that's normal. That's the way the application works. And then students can answer, students and parents in both their sections can answer either they've already completed that 2021 tax return, or they will file at a later date or not going to file, right? So students have those options already completed. That's pretty obvious, I think. Will file would be used if parents or students have not yet filed but are going to do so. And the benefit in adding this option, will file, is that if the application is otherwise complete, with the exception of the financial data, that student's application will be considered an on-time application, provided that it was submitted before the March 2nd deadline, even if they have to log back in after taxes have been filed to provide the actual data. Because what this will do is it will prompt the student to say, you indicated that you will file your 2021 taxes, so please estimate what you think that information looks like. So that's exactly what the students are going to do. They're going to include an estimation. And the truth is, most of us make pretty much about the same money year after year. So when the student gets their actual tax return, they will log back in to the application and enter the correct information. But in most cases, it's not going to vary very wildly from the estimated amounts. And then not going to file would be used if a student or parents in the parent section do not make enough money to necessitate reporting their taxes to the IRS. And there's more information in the parent section about that. We'll talk about that in greater detail, when and how to use the not going to file option, and what can happen if a parent or a student selects that they're not going to file, but that their income that they report is over the IRS threshold. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Oh, it's right here. Okay. So if families indicate that they're not going to file, the application is not going to ask any more financial questions. Know that the college may require a verification of non-filing from the IRS, or they're going to, I don't want to open up a can of worms without looking at the next slides, but this may be requested by the college. There are other scenarios that may occur, but this is probably the most common scenario. A student says they're not going to file, the college gets that, and then they're going to say, okay, if you made enough money to be required to file, but you're not going to, I need to see that non-filing letter. And here's more information about how that works at this link here. Now, I mentioned, if you've met the income filing threshold, you may not know what those are, so you can click on this link and it will tell you for a single individual, for a married couple, for individuals, married couples filing separately. It breaks down all the filing statuses and tells you for each of those statuses what the maximum amount of income you can earn without being required to report it to the IRS. So here it says in 2021, if you reported that you were single and you were under age 65, the threshold was $12,550. So if and a single person under 65 makes more than that amount, they will be required to file. And they'll get a pop-up on the application telling them that. So these other questions are also asking about the student or a spouse, if applicable, other information, right? And so it's going to ask what the adjusted gross income is. And this is important. It tells you exactly where to find that information on your form 1040. That's the IRS return 1040, and which line to find that information on. And then the next question is a different question. It's asking, of this income that you earned, how much income tax did you actually pay? And it also tells students where to find that information. So I'm not sure why, but students often input the same dollar figure for both of these fields, when in fact, those are vastly different numbers. The income earned on top, adjusted income earned, and underneath that is the income tax that was actually paid. So again, really important to read what the question is asking so that students know where to find that information. Now, students are going to report how much they made from work wages, right? And so they can pull that information off their W-2s and their 1099s. If students didn't work, it's pretty easy. Enter a 0, right? And know that any required questions indicated by the red asterisk cannot be left blank. So leaving that blank is not the same as reporting a 0. If it's a 0, input the 0 there. Then it's going to move into the assets section of these questions. And once again, same identical questions in the student section and in the parent section. So in the student section, most of these are going to be pretty low numbers, right? Not many students, especially high school students, have a lot of money or investments. So most of these will be pretty low numbers, if not zeros. Now, more information in this section, right, is asking about various credits that students may have earned, any child support paid. It's asking about various types of credits and other benefits that were applied and reported to the IRS. And so know, though, that some of these credits are going to be taken from that adjusted gross income, so it doesn't count as income and doesn't negatively impact the student's eligibility. Additional questions, it's a long list of questions. To be exact, I believe it's 108 questions. So it's a lengthy application, but if you just read the questions verbatim, I think most students are going to be able to navigate through this and find out where on that form 1040 to find the information. Notice that certain income is going to be reported as income earned from work. Other income may be reported as untaxed income. So again, that's all spelled out on the application itself, right? It just tells you right here. There's no other way to make it clear other than reading every last question or every last word of the question and following these instructions on where to find the information. So untaxed income continued. This several questions on the untaxed income section, right? So these are the things that you do want to report. It may not apply so much to the student section as it will to the parent section. But again, it's the same questions for both sets of individuals, right? So any retirement plan contributions, child support that was received, not paid, that was asked on a different section, and any cash support received, right? So be sure to include all of that just to have the most accurate information. The next section is going to ask whether or not the student received any of these federal benefits or in some cases state benefits. And it will not impact a student's eligibility for financial aid or eligibility for any of these programs. It's simply helping to determine the student's need because most of these programs are need-based programs. So if the student has already met the criteria for some of these need-based programs, they likely might meet a lot of the criteria that we are requesting for Cal Grant purposes. Now, one of the questions asked in the section is about a dislocated worker. This tends to throw students off. They don't know what that question is asking. A dislocated worker is just somebody who's been displaced, right? They were laid off, lost a job. And so that's really all there is to it. I don't know what more to say about a dislocated worker, but it does ask the question. And so these are some of the scenarios that may apply as a dislocated worker. It also will ask, is the spouse of an active duty member of the U.S. forces? Has that individual experienced a loss of employment? Is they're underemployed or unemployed? So just answer the questions honestly and as accurately as possible. Now, this is important. I sort of alluded to this earlier, but what if the income has changed in the last 2 years, right? Remember, we're using tax information from 2 years prior. And so if 2 years ago you were making a lot of money in a great job, and then you or your parents lost their job due to COVID or some other situation that really caused a decline in the income, we want that information to be reflected as your current situation. So in this case, if income has decreased, there may be a way for the college financial aid office to recalculate that information to currently reflect the most accurate and, well, current information, right? So this is really, really important. Students tend to not to be very proactive, but if this situation applies to you or your student, definitely follow up. It's absolutely worthwhile because we saw during COVID and all the job losses, during, say, even wildfires, when families lost their homes, they had nowhere to go. They were basically displaced. There are lots of situations that would be considered special circumstances, whether it's a loss of income, a loss of the primary home, excessive medical bills. There's a whole list of things that colleges are allowed to use as exceptions. So this is where students really want to be proactive and follow back up with the college that they're most likely to attend and work with that financial aid office to say, hey, I think I have a special situation. And I'd like you to take the review my application. It's sort of an appeal, if you will, but the student is asking for the college to take a second look at that application. And that college may then ask the student to bring in documentation to support their case. But it's definitely worthwhile because I can guarantee you if a student is in the situation where their income has decreased, but they don't let the college know that, nothing's going to change on that application, right? It's only the college that's able to go in there and alter that application. All right, we're at the next break time. So we'll have 5 minutes here. My clock says it's 2:12. I hope that's the same version that you have on your clocks. So we'll go ahead and come back in 5 minutes at 2:17, and Mina will be up next. Thank you, everybody.
Hi, everybody. My name is Mina Tran. I'm one of the trainers here at the California Student Aid Commission. I want to make sure that you can hear me. I know it's Friday. Let's do a quick question. If you could fly anywhere in the world, where would you go? Go ahead and type it in the chat box so I know that you can hear me. And then we are in the home stretch of today's CADAA line-by-line webinar. Maldives, Cambodia, Thailand, Philippines. I've not made it to the Philippines yet. Spain, Paris. I would like to go to Japan right now. For some reason, I'm really craving a bowl of udon. Ivan looks like he's going to Japan as well. Thank you so much for that. I am going to turn my camera off. I do find it a little bit distracting. Thank you for indulging me in this travel talk. I hope you all have a wonderful, well-rested 3-day weekend, but we do need to get through this last stretch. So keep asking questions in the Q&A chat box. My colleagues are on the line to answer any questions, and I'm going to continue with parent information. Thank you so much. All right, parent information. Yvonne has covered a lot of the student information. And in this next section, we're going to cover the parent section. Now, the first question before we even delve into it is it's going to ask, what is the parental marital status? Now, always answer it based on what is the parent marital status on the day that the students are completing their application. Now, if the parents are perhaps living together but are not married, students will select unmarried and both parents living together and will still need to enter the information for both of their parents. Now, in the case that a student puts that parent are divorced or separated, it will really only ask for one parent information. Parents will be designated as parent 1 or parent 2. And initially, it will ask for a parent's social security number or the individual taxpayer identification number. The ITIN number is what we often refer to. If parents do not have either of those numbers, all you have to do is make sure that the students enter all zeros. Now, we want to make sure that the parent is also including their names if they have multiple last names. If they have a suffix such as a junior, we want to make sure that parent information is also correct. Please keep in mind that the date of birth is going to be entered as month, day, and then the year. So make sure it's 2 digits for the month, 2 digits for the day, and then 4 digits for the year. So as I'd mentioned before, we're asking for parents' marital status as of the day that the student is completing the application. If parents are separated or divorced, then it will only ask for information for parent 1. So it will not need 2 information, and that's why you will see this not required screen for parent 2. So in this section, we are going to be asking for parent demographic information. Yet again, we will be asking for parents' email address, hopefully one that they check on a regular basis. Should CSAC need to contact them for more information. And then from there, it's asking what state does the parents live in? And did the parents start living in the state prior to January 1st, 2018? This is to determine the state residency for students who are below the age of 18. We are determining based on the parents' residency. Parent household size. So this is a question that I think a lot of students make the errors for. So let's look at parent household size. For the student, they're going to make sure that they count themselves, count their parents, any children who receive more than half of their support from the parents, even if they don't necessarily live with the parents. So this could be other siblings, maybe siblings that are attending college, etc. There might be other dependents who live with the parents and also receive more than half of their supports with parents. So this might be grandparents or aunts and uncles, etc. That might be living in the same household, but make sure that they're receiving more than half of their support from their parents. And that would be the number that you would determine that household size. The next question is going to be asking number in college. So you're going to enter the number of the people in college, unless there's someone else in the household, maybe another sibling or even the parents, if they're currently attending college. If not, if the student who is filling out the application is the only one that will be entering college, then the answer will be 1. And remember, if you ever have any questions, always click on that I icon. That will usually provide a little bit more definition, a little bit more information if you're unsure of how to answer the question. So now we're going to delve into the parent financial information. So as always, it is going to ask for tax information from prior years. So for students who are completing the 23-24 CADAA, it will be asking parents for their 2021 income and tax information. So to start, it's going to ask, has the taxes already been completed? Will parents file the taxes, or are they not going to file? Now, if parents will file, it'll still allow students to go in and maybe do rough estimates of what their parents' income and taxes were, and then they can always go back into their application and make those changes. Yvonne had gone over briefly the IRS threshold, and so parents yet again will also have to meet that IRS threshold. If they are not planning on file, if it goes above that threshold, they will be required to file. And so here's just a little bit more information regarding that. Definitely check out that IRS website. I believe it's on page 7 with that table that breaks it down by single or married, filing jointly, etc., to provide that threshold of which students and their families would need to file taxes. So in this case, for the 23-24 CADAA, we are looking at the 2021 taxes. This is just a sample of that table that I had mentioned of the income threshold. So as you can see, the numbers are fairly low. I think the max that families can make without needing to file would be about that 27,800. So this is just really handy to check to see if students would need to file. And in doing so, if parents do not have a social security number, they can apply for an ITIN to do so. So following in this section, it's now going to delve into the parents' income tax. So, oftentimes, it's helpful to have the taxes in front of you because it will tell students and their parents exactly where to find the answer. So for example, what was your parents' adjusted gross income for 2021? You would look on that form 1040 and look at line 11 for that. Now, if parents did not work, they would of course put a 0 in those cases. Now, keep in mind that 89 and 90, a lot of times students and parents get a little confused and they might sometimes put the same number. Keep in mind one question is asking about the adjusted gross income, and then the other question is asking about the income tax. So those should definitely not be the same number. So it's parent income from work is going to be oftentimes found on W-2 forms or maybe even 1099 forms. If parents did not work, they can leave all the questions blank or not blank, zeros, because you cannot leave a question blank. So all of these are required. And so parents who are not working will just put a 0 for all of those places. Now, when it does ask for parent asset, It will need to ask questions about any cash savings or checking account, but keep in mind that you do not need to report any sort of retirement plan in this section. And this is also asset would be considered second homes. It would not be primary homes that would be counted as assets. So here it's additional taxable money that has been received or credits that have been paid out, such as other different types of financial aid that parents might have received, such as AmeriCorps, federal work study, etc. There's different programs that allow students to get paid work experience, and so this would be the section that they would put it. Oftentimes it might ask about combat pay, or if parents were in the military, or different child support, and so this would be the section that parents would provide that information. So in this section, it's going to talk about all the different incomes that are not reported on the parents' federal income tax return. So these are more the untaxed income, such as extended foster care benefits, different transitional housing placement for non-minor dependents, etc. CalWorks payment, untaxed Social Security benefits. This would be the section where parents would apply that, and if it isn't applicable to them, make sure you are entering zeros for them. Okay, and so continuing with the financial information, it's going to ask whether any of these are applicable to the parent, whether they received during the last 2 years any sort of Medi-Cal or Medicaid, any supplemental security income, CalFresh, CalWorks, different special supplemental nutritional programs such as WIC for women's, infants, and children. And so, please note that checking any of these boxes doesn't necessarily affect the eligibility for these benefits, and it won't reduce any sort of eligibility for financial aid as well. So in this case, if students were considered independent, know that all this entire parent section would not have even populated. So when the student was initially completing their application, those first dozen or so questions to determine whether a student is dependent or independent will be determined. So if the students are dependent, then it will require a parent section to be completed. But if a student is independent, whether it's they're married, they have a dependent of their own, they're in the military, etc., then they would not need to fill the parent information. Now, in case there's scenarios where students do not have access to a parent, maybe they are considered a dependent, but have no access, no communication whatsoever with the parent, there is a question on their financial application that says, I am not able to provide that information. And so they will just fill the application to their best ability, submit it, and then follow up with their financial aid office. All right, so now we are in the home stretch of filling out the California DREAM Act application. We've gone through the student section, they've selected their 10 schools, they've entered their parent information. So now comes the last part, which is the sign and submit part. Thankfully, it is not as complicated as the FAFSA. It is a fairly simple process. So for the student, we would just have them essentially read all of this information to make sure that they acknowledge that they will notify the college if they default on any student loans, that all the information is accurate, etc. And so from there, they would be able to submit it. Now, if there are any errors in the student's application, whether something was left incomplete, or maybe there is conflicting tax information, there will be a red notification letting students know what needs to be corrected before students can even submit anything. So students would need to just click on that box that says by clicking submit below those red letters, and from there they will be able to just submit their application. Fairly simple process. Usually it will take about 24 hours for the application itself to be processed and recognized in our system. But students should be able to go back in and make corrections, whether they need to go back in and make add 10 more schools, or maybe go in once their parents have filed taxes to update information. They can go back in and continue to resubmit any new information that they make. Now for the parents section, to sign the application, it's a same easy process where they would just click on that and sign. And once students have submitted their application, it will designate, especially for the male students between 18 to 25, that they're required to register for selective service. Now, we no longer require the registration of selective service in order to receive state aid. However, it is in general a practice that all male students between 18 to 25, regardless of citizenship status, should be registering for selective service, but is not a requirement in order to receive any sort of state aid. Now, if parents may be living in a different country and are not able to be right next to the student as they're submitting their financial aid application, their CADAA, it's a fairly easy process. They would just go to the dream.csac.ca.gov website. There is a parent signature button that they'll click, and it will ask them for their parent PIN code. Now, oftentimes parents might not remember it, and it's an easy process as long as they know their child's demographic information. Oftentimes they'll ask for their name, first, last name, date of birth, email address, and as long as it matches, then it will provide the parent with a PIN code, which then they can submit as their signature. So whether the parent is living out of the country, or maybe it wasn't able to attend a Cash for College night with their child, this is something that they can easily do on their own. All right, so the CADAA has been submitted. The student's now waiting for the next step. So what should they be doing right after they submit the application? So to start, they can access their CalSAR. So the CalSAR is the California Student Aid Report. Usually it's available about 24 hours after they've submitted their application. All it is it is a summary of their financial aid application. This is really handy if you are maybe working, if you are a high school counselor and working with a student whose GPA has not yet matched to their financial aid application. You can ask them to see their CalSAR, because this lets you know that the application has been successfully submitted. And this will also let you know how they filled out their demographic information. So that way you can go in and edit the student's GPA so that it matches based on the student's last name, based on their address, etc. And so the CAR will also provide the EFC, so the expected family contribution. And so that is all available on the California Student Aid Report. So it's really handy for parents and students just to have a copy in case they need to go back and make any sort of correction. So we had talked about some of the different requirements of AB 540. So not only meeting those 3 years of education, receiving a high school diploma from a California high school, but the last one is to make sure that students submit that AB 540 affidavit. Now, they just need to submit this affidavit to the college that they're planning on attending. So they do not need to do this as they're applying to 20 colleges. They do not need to submit this 20 different times. So this is definitely something that they will just do to the college that they're planning on attending. Oftentimes this form can be found at the financial aid office or the admissions office, or even on their college website. So it's a fairly short form. I think it's 1 or 2 pages that they will need to follow up and submit as one of the requirements to qualify as AB 540. So let's talk about the process. We've gone over so many different sections, and I'm just going to do like a quick summary of everything. So to start, we want to make sure that students are aware of all the different college applications, state applications, state financial aid applications, etc. In the state of California, both the FAFSA and the CADAA opens up on October 1st. And the priority deadline is March 2nd. So that's quickly approaching. Now, if you do have students that are planning on attending a community college in the state of California, they have a September 2nd deadline. But ultimately, that March 2nd is our priority deadline because we process for almost all of our Cal Grant awards. We process for the high school entitlement, transfer entitlement, community college entitlement program as well, although the September 2nd is extended for that. And any of the competitive awards are also processed under that March 2nd. So if you are, working at a high school, this is something that you can start telling your juniors about, because over the summer, they can start gathering documents that they need to complete the CADAA. If you're unsure what documents they need, we have on our CSAC website flyers that you can send home with students. It's on our All In for FAFSA CADAA page, and hopefully maybe one of my colleagues can place a link in the chat box. And from there, once students are ready to start the applications, they can then create a username and password for the CADAA. Now, it is a bit of a process because they do have to go through the security check, etc. So maybe this is something you can have your students do prior to October 1st. That way, October 1st, they're ready to log in and start their application. So from October 1st till March 2nd, students should be completing that CADAA and submitting it. So that's the key thing, not just saving it, but they need to submit that application. And so as long as everything is included, parents' financial, etc., parents' signature, then it should be considered a complete application. Now, if it is missing anything, missing parent tax information or missing parent signature, it will be considered an incomplete application. However, it will be considered on time as long as it was submitted prior to March 2nd. Now, once students have submitted their CADAA, as I'd mentioned before, they should definitely print or at least save a copy of their CalSAR. That way they can refer back to it as, proof of how they answered their question, or if they need to refer to anything. And so from there, if students need to go back into their application and add 10 more colleges, now would be a great time to do that. We want to make sure that all the colleges that the student is considering applying and attending receives that student information. That way they can be processed for any institutional aid, maybe any scholarships, etc. And so, we know that tax information is being asked of prior year, 2 years prior. And 2 years ago looks a lot different than what it does now. So if there is a significant change in finances, maybe, in 2023, parents are now separated, or a parent has since lost their job due to the pandemic, etc. There's lots of different circumstances. And if that is the case, make sure that once the student decides what college they're planning on attending, they will reach out to the financial aid office to make a professional judgment. So financial aid offices are able to make judgments calls for, loss of income, maybe, families were affected by all the different wildfires or floodings, etc. So definitely reach out to financial aid offices if there is a change in finances. And from there, check emails on a regular basis. That way you are up to date with anything that is pending or needing to be submitted. And that is why we really want students to use an email address that they will check on a regular basis. I don't recommend students using their high school email, because once they graduate from high school, they might not necessarily have access to that email. Sometimes students will be, selected for additional verification. So they might need to submit documentation. And so they want to be able to check their email and then follow up with their financial aid office if there's anything else. And then once they start receiving award notifications, college acceptances, they can decide what college they're planning on attending. From there, they will go into their Web Grants for Students portal to confirm their school of attendance, as well as confirm their high school graduation date. And I'll talk about that in the next few slides. And last but not least, once they decide what college of attendance they're planning on attending, they will need to submit that AB 540 affidavit. Now, even though it says end here as that last box, I do want to point out that to receive financial aid, students need to reapply every year. So this is not just like a one and done application. Students should be renewing their application every year that they want to be eligible for financial aid, which for Cal Grant purposes, they are eligible for a maximum of 4 years of Cal Grant eligibility. And I would also recommend students look into our DREAM Act Service Incentive Grant for additional ways to receive grant money, or our LAPE program, our Learning Allied Education program, if that is something that they are interested in. Okay, so I mentioned Web Grants for Students. Web Grants for Students is the portal that the Student Aid Commission uses to communicate with students, letting them know about their Cal Grant award, or if they're eligible for the middle class scholarship, or even the Chafee grant for foster youth. Now, when they log in, they will see a row of different boxes and for each different award. So if they have the Cal Grant, they'll just have that row of boxes. And depending on whether there's any sort of pending item, they will most likely see their award status as pending, because especially for your high school seniors, there is 2 things that they need to do. One is they need to confirm their school of attendance in the fall. And right now it's too early for students to really decide. A lot of times students are calling us frantic on March 2nd, thinking that they have to make that decision by March 2nd. That's not the case. Students just need to make sure that they submit their financial aid application by March 2nd. Once the college acceptance letters are arriving, usually oftentimes in the spring, maybe May, June, once students decide what college they're planning on attending, they'll log into Web Grants for Students and click on that to do, and it will ask them for the college of attendance that they're planning on attending in the fall. The second thing that they will be expected to do is to confirm their high school graduation date. Now that will not be available. That link won't be available until the month that they graduate from high school. So if the high school had said that students are going to be graduating May 23rd, then starting May 1st, students can log into Web Grants and click on that pending to see the different, to just confirm their high school graduation date. This is just a quick to-do list. For students, when they log into their Web Grants, they can check their award status. A lot of times students will receive that preliminary Cal Grant award notification, letting them know that they've been preliminarily awarded, minus the fact that they still have 2 or so pending items that they have to do. So the pending item is number 3. They have to confirm that the school of attendance is accurate. And number 5, they need to verify their high school graduation date. So those 2 things students can do essentially May, June, July even. Students can also check to make sure that their GPA has been received. So that's really important, because in order to get processed for Cal Grant consideration, we need a financial aid application submitted by that March 2nd deadline, but we also need to make sure that a GPA has been matched to that financial aid application. So this is a really good opportunity for students to double check that a GPA has been received. And if the student has applied for the Chafee grant, which is specifically for foster youth students, they can double check that the Department of Social Services has verified their foster youth status. Well, we did it. This is pretty much wrapping up today's webinar. Thank you so much for attending. This is just all the different reminders that we want to, tell students. The application hopefully shouldn't be too complicated. And even if you need help or support, we have lots of different Cash for College workshops that we would love for you to attend and have financial aid experts to assist you. I see Nancy on the line. If Nancy can possibly type in the chat box, or my colleagues, I know that Immigrants Rising has a few workshops happening in the next few weeks that me and my colleagues will be attending and assisting in if students need any additional help completing their California DREAM Act application. If there's any sort of questions, please don't hesitate to have students, reach out to whether they're high school counselors or even, Dreamer resource centers on college campuses or financial aid offices, or even our student support. We want to be able to help students out with any questions. And because the DREAM Act application is an application that CSAC administers, we are actually able to go into the student's application to see how they answered. And so we can maybe determine like what might have caused an error. And that's definitely not something we can do with the FAFSA. So overall, this is the different websites that we find really helpful. If you want more information about all of our different CSAC programs, go to csac.ca.gov. To complete the DREAM Act application and to submit that parent signature, go to dream.csac.ca.gov. If students need their web grants for students website, that would be the mygrantinfo.csac.ca.gov. If you are from a high school or even a college and need support in either matching your student's GPA or you're uncertain about something, please don't hesitate to reach out to our school support phone number. And if you are a student online, please don't hesitate to reach out to our student support number as well. I do want to point out that closer to that March 2nd deadline, our phone lines get pretty slammed. So please be patient with our technicians who are taking these phone calls. But I see questions are continuing to come in. Please continue typing in. We managed to finish the webinar in a fairly early process, so keep asking questions. But thank you all so much for attending today's webinar and learning more about CADAA line by line. We hope that you found this helpful. And don't hesitate to reach out to school support or student support for any other questions or support. And I think that's it. Enjoy your much deserved 3-day weekend. Hang on the line if you have any other questions. Thank you so much for this. If you did not receive today's PDF, please check your junk or spam folders first. And if you did not receive it, you can email outreachandtraining@csac.ca.gov, and we will email you a copy of the PDF. And know that today's webinar has been recorded. We are aiming to clean it up just a little bit, and then we will share that on our CSAC website as well. Thank you all. Happy Friday.